Hi, welcome to another Sweet 16 Sunday. I'm Paula Storm, and today I wanted to show you a little bit about using the Handy Quilter rulers. And this is one of them. This is the, I'm not sure if you can see it very well here, but this is just the straight edge ruler, and that's the one I'm going to be using today. And I'm going to show you how to make this cute little placemat. So I'm going to do all of this project on the Handy Quilter Sweet 16. So it's a Quilt As You Go project, and it's a little placemat. As you can see, you can store your little knife and fork in the pockets there. So I'm going to get set up at the machine. All we really need, I'll get that out of the way, all we need for this project is of course our straight ruler. We need some backing fabric, and I've got some really cute fabric there from Anna Maria Horner. A little scrap of batting, so I've just got a square a bit bigger than what I need for this project, and then I've got a pile of little strips. These strips are a fabric from a really good friend of mine, Tammy Green. She is an Australian designer, and she prints all her own fabrics, and they're really cute. So have a look for Buddy's Corner if you really like these fabrics. The other thing that we need is a couple more strips to make the pockets. We need some background strips. I've got just these bicycle fabrics here, and they need to be exactly the same width as the fabrics that we're going to use for our little pocket. Okay, so you can see they're the same width there. I've made these 3 inches, so that's a good start. So we need a 3-inch strip for the background. We need a 3-inch strip for our little pocket, and we need 2 of those. So I've got 2 sets of those, and that's pretty much all we need. Oh, and a little bit of bias binding. So I've got some matching bias binding here that we're going to use for around the outside of our placemat. So I'm going to get to the machine and we'll start stitching. Okay, so I'm over at my machine now, and what I've got here is just my batting, and I've just got a scrap from a leftover quilt. It's just a cotton batting, and I've also got my backing fabric. And what I'm going to do first is just run around the outside with my basting feature. And I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. One, I want to keep the all the layers all nicely together. I've just been in another menu, so I'll go back to the start here. And the other reason is I kind of want to get my eye in with my ruler. I want to get some practice done before I start using the ruler. So this can help me get my eye in. So I'm just going to start as normal, bringing up my bobbin thread, and I'll just start stitching. Now I've set the machine to my basting stitch, so I'm just going to baste, as I said, around the outside. Now as you can see, the width of the foot is about 1/4 of an inch from the outside. So what I'm doing is, to practice, to keep a nice straight line, I'm using the ruler and I'm running it along the inside of the foot there, and I'm kind of watching the outside of the foot and making sure it's sort of touching the outside, and that's what's giving me my seam allowance. And that's quite important for the next step, because what we're going to be doing next is actually piecing using the stitch and flip method on the Sweet 16. So as I said, I'm just basting. I've got that set on 3/4 of a second on the basting feature, and I've done another video on that basting feature. If you're interested in learning more about that, just head over to my YouTube channel. Now I'm going to stop with the needle down, spin around, and keep going all the way around. So I might speed this up for you, and when I finish basting we'll get to the next step. So what I'm doing now is just holding the needle up, needle down button, and it'll just keep stitching. It'll keep stitching stitches in the one place until I'm ready for it to stop. So what I've done is done all of those stitches to create a little knot. I'm going to pull that thread, needle down, needle back up again to bring up my bobbin, and then I'll just snip off those threads. And that's it. So we're done now with the basting. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start about in the middle, and I'm going to grab a couple of pieces of fabric. Now these don't have to be the same width at all, so they can be quite random, but we just want to start about in the middle somewhere. And you can see there that I've got a piece of fabric that is about the same length as my batting, maybe a little bit longer. and that's what we need for this technique. And then we're going to take another piece of fabric, and just as we normally would with a stitch and flip method, we're going to put them right sides together and make sure they line up on the side there. Then I'm going to go back to the machine. I'm going to start at one edge. Now, as you know, with as I mentioned earlier, the distance from that side of the foot there to the needle is about 1/4 inch. So you can be a bit more generous if you want to keep things nice and stable. Okay, so the ruler's got these measurements on here. I'm not actually going to use those measurements for this example, but in future videos I will show you how to use those straight lines there. In this one, we're just going to use it as a guide and to keep our stitching straight. So I'm going to go to the edge there, and I'm just going to keep an eye on the fabric and make sure it's kind of lined up with the edge of my presser foot. I'm going to turn off the basting feature, and I'm going to slow down my speed to about 35%. Now, I just wanted to mention threads because I always get a question about what sort of threads I use. Today I'm using Sofine in the top, and that's a Superior Threads thread, and I've got a pre-wound bottom line bobbin in the bottom. So that's what I'm using today. I'm just going to, as always, bring up my bobbin thread and hang on to those two while I get started. I'm just going to sew those few stitches in place. Now, as I did earlier, I can do that by just using my foot and pushing the pedal, or I can hold the needle up, needle down button, and it will just sew a few stitches in the spot until I let go. Now, I want my needle to stop in the down position, so I'm just going to set that up so that when I stop, it should stop in the down position. Okay, so I've tied off my knot. I've lined up my ruler here, and you can see I'm kind of lining it up with the edge of the foot there, just so I can keep it straight. I was surprised how little pressure I need to put on the ruler. I actually found that I don't need to push down too hard at all, and when I did push down, it was too hard to move the quilt sandwich. So you just want a nice light pressure, but you want to be secure, kind of how you would hold a ruler when you're cutting with a rotary cutter. You just want a pressure going straight down, and I usually have my finger, one of my fingers or two of my fingers off to the side of the ruler, just to make sure that I'm all lined up properly. So as I start, I'm actually, as you can see, I've got quite a small stitch happening there. And what I'm doing is I'm just keeping an eye on the ruler and the outside here and making sure that those stitches are straight and lined up. With this kind of project, it doesn't actually matter if your seams are perfect. It actually looks really fun and funky if you have some of those seams a bit wonky, so I wouldn't worry too much about being too precise. The one thing I would worry about is I'm actually just going to slow that down so that I can talk as I'm quilting. The one thing I would worry about is making sure that I've got an even pressure on that ruler. The other thing, I don't want to crawl my hands up the ruler as I'm sewing. So if you need to stop and rearrange your hands, always stop. Don't try and shift your hands or shift your ruler. Now, I wanted to mention too, you do need to use a specialty long arm ruler with the Sweet 16. You can't use your rulers that you get for rotary cutting, for example, because the difference between long arm rulers and these and your normal rulers is that this one is about 1/4 inch thick, so it's a lot thicker than your regular ruler, and you do need that thickness so that it doesn't accidentally run underneath your foot as you're stitching. Nobody wants a needle to hit their ruler and 1, damage their needle, 2, damage their ruler, and 3, maybe damage the machine. So just be careful that you only use the 1/4 inch thick rulers when you're doing this kind of piecing. So I've done that stitching, my first line of stitching. So I'm just going to bring up my bobbin thread. As always, I'm not going to worry about tying off those threads because I'm actually going to stitch those down later. But I'm just going to cut off that bobbin thread. And now what I'm going to do, I'm just trying to arrange this so you can see. As you can see, I'm just going to flip that over and sort of finger press that down. Now at this stage I can see that my tension's actually really bad. You can see I can pull that over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop, I'm going to go back, check my tension, check that everything's threaded properly, and I'll be back and do some more stitching. Okay, so I've fixed up my tension and sewn that seam again. So now I'm just going to fold that seam over and just kind of finger press it flat so it's nice and flat and even. I'm going to grab my next piece of fabric, pop that down on top, and just continue on with the stitch and flip method. Do some stitches in the one spot, and then using my ruler and my hands to guide the fabric. All I'm using the ruler for is to get a straight line. So if I'm going off a little bit, I can actually adjust as I'm going to keep that nice and straight. So that's the only reason for using the ruler in this case. And I'm just trying to move the fabric nice and evenly to get those nice even stitches, keeping an eye ahead of me to make sure I'm staying nice and straight. So you can use this technique for any quilt as you go methods that you like. You could do wonky log cabin blocks and just continue stitching around and round and round the outside to create a cute little block. You can make cushions, all sorts of things. Okay, so our next piece, we're getting quite close to the end now. So our next piece I want to include a little pocket. So I've got my strip of fabric. This is about 14 inches long and about 3 inches wide. So that's a, it doesn't have to be exactly that, but that's a good guesstimate. And what I'm going to do is fold it in half with the wrong sides together. And then I'm going to place it towards the bottom of this last piece. So I'm going to pop that there. And that's going to create my little pocket. Then I'm going to grab another piece, and this is the other piece that was the exact same width as my pocket piece that I mentioned at the start. And I'm just going to line that up along the edge and overlap. So I've got all of the layers. I've got my fabric that I've just sewn down and finger pressed over. I've got my pocket that's folded in half, and I've got another piece of fabric that I'm just popping on top. And now I'm just going to sew that whole seam, once again using my ruler to keep it nice and straight. I'm actually just going to sew a few extra stitches where I can actually see where that folded fabric was, and I'm just sewing some extra stitches there to make sure it's really nice and secure. Because I know when the kids get a hold of this, they're going to want to pull and push things in and out of the little pocket. So I'll make sure that's nice and tight, and I'll finish stitching that seam. Again, move the ruler out of my way when it starts to get too close to me. Okay, so I've stitched that seam. Now I'm just going to flip this one over, and I'm going to flip over that pocket at the same time. And I'm just going to finger press that all down nice and smooth, like that. And there we see you've got the little pocket. So I'm going to grab another piece of fabric. Might go with the red spot this time. And once again, lay it on top. Now these strips are actually just the width of the fabric. I've cut varying widths so that we get a variety of strip widths. So I started, I think 3.5 was my widest, and I went down to 2 inches wide when they were cut. So this one's about 3 inches wide, and that should finish off the rest of this placemat on this side, and then we'll go back and finish the other side. So there we go, that's close enough to the edge for me, so I'm happy with that side. And you can see now we've got our little pocket here. When we go and bind, that'll cover up those bottom edges, and we'll end up with a really nice smooth edge there for our knife and fork or cutlery to go in that little pocket. So we'll go back and do the other side now. I'm actually going to flip it around because I'm comfortable going in that one direction. So I'll flip it around so I can continue going in that one direction for the rest of the placemat. Okay, so that's the last one. So I'll fold that all over. Now what I'm going to do is take this to my other table, my bigger table, and I'm just going to draw some curves around those outside edges and trim it up, and then I'll pop my binding on and we're done. So that's it. That's how to make a placemat with little pockets using the HQ Sweet 16 and the straight ruler. It's called the HQ straight edge ruler, and it's got the 45-degree lines. It's got heaps of different guides that you can use in all your different piecing. I know it's a little bit hard to see on camera there, but that's the ruler that I've used for this project. There's lots of other rulers available, so get to your local dealer and check out what they have and practice some stitch and flip quilt as you go.